So guys, for this YouTube channel, I definitely want to start reviewing some animes, and even ones that I fell in love with as a kid and then just have different opinions about. And one of them is Nuku Dash, and it's a controversial anime for a bunch of reasons. That there are two versions. There was one in the early 90s, I think it's called Nuku TV, like she kind of wears red hair. Then they did another rendition of Nuku Dash. This one she has like green hair, and this one is kind of like a little bit more controversial for a couple of reasons. That definitely the original story was about two people having a bitter divorce and with robots and action and craziness galore. So, that was kind of like a very original concept, especially in Japan, like almost like doing divorce in a cartoony way. But also, it's a little controversial because divorce is very seriously. Even if you look in American cartoons, you've never really had anything that took divorce in a very like comical way. I would say so. This would have probably been the first like thing in media that ever took divorce in a comical way. Nuku TV, and then actually with Nuku Dash, if you really watch it, um, it's definitely a melodrama. There's definitely some really good emotional moments in it, but it's definitely very inspired by Ghost in the Shell, Neon Genesis Evangelion, and it's really a horny teenager comedy. So episode five of and the whole series and Nuku Dash is about this android that is freed from a laboratory, and she figures out her purpose in life, and and then that's that really. And I don't want to reveal a little bit more about it because definitely it ruins it for everybody. Obviously there's going to be some spoilers in here, but I definitely just want to keep it a little vague in case you're interested. So episode 5 is in Nuku Dash. It was actually the first episode that I watched as a kid. So what happened was I watched 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, then 1, 2, 3, 4. So I think like when I was younger and I was just in my emotions and not paying attention, having a hard time staying focused, not ADHD, but just in my emotions a lot. I thought this was the first episode, and I thought this would have been a strong first episode. But in this episode, what happens is that um, Nuku goes on a date, and it's actually with one of Ryunosuke's friends. So it starts with Ryunosuke being cornered by a couple of his guy friends. Like he's a middle schooler, they're all middle school, and they kind of notice that he's hanging out with this girl Nuku that's like college age, and they don't realize that she's an android. And Ryunosuke doesn't realize that as well. But the thing about it is that they kind of question him. They're kind of like, who's this girl that moved in with you? Are you, is she just a friend of the family? Is she a relative? Is she kind of like a foreign exchange student? Other things like that. And then Ryunosuke lies and says that that's actually his girlfriend. And they kind of just don't believe it. And he's saying things like she calls him honey and darling. So you're kind of seeing two things. I think that one thing is that he does. You see, kind of, I mean, he kind of exaggerates it, so it's kind of really really funny, and because it is kind of like he's being himself really. So I think that there's some humor in that, but it's also kind of what you see in a lot of anime. Um, and I think this is actually kind of good for the show is that he objectifies because obviously it makes him feel like a big dude for being like this guy in middle school having a girlfriend that's probably 18, 19, and just really bragging about it, and then also just saying like saying like all the lovey-dovey stuff that he says. So it's kind of like trying to show off what you got really. Unfortunately for me, when I was young and dumb, I had a girlfriend that was the same type of thing really. That yeah, that she and I were both promiscuous people, and I would always like talk about it in high school. Like I grew up in high school like in the early 2000s. It was never right then. It's not right now, but I remember that was kind of like the norm and stuff like that. So it was kind of reflective of the times, but also in Japan, um, but more so in Japan. That there is objectification of women, and I've kind of talked about how Nuku represents the Madonna horror complex. Like obviously she's the Madonna figure because she's a protector. Um, she sacrifices herself, and she's very caring and motherly. And then the horror complex is that she's very, very objectified, and she's also kind of naive to how she objectifies herself. So she kind of is the mix of the Madonna and the whore, and that's kind of how she's portrayed in the series. But she's definitely more so a whore to Torinosuke, honestly, because he objectifies her. So later in the episode, um, the three guys go to her house and go to their house, and Ryunosuke tells Nuku Nuku to do a couple of things for her, like hold his hands, say things like call her honey and darling and other things like that. And he actually tells her a lie, which is that Sabochi, one of his friends, he doesn't believe love exists because he was not loved as a child. So it's kind of weird because obviously, like if they did this in South Park, I think that they would kind of capture Ryunosuke being a jerk a lot better because Cartman's very manipulative and he's manipulating her, but they kind of have like the very sad and melodramatic music. So I think when you watch it, you're getting the wrong emotional beat. It's not really supposed to be about Nuku Nuku having a caring heart. It's more about Ryunosuke being an immature middle schooler trying to show off his horror. That's what it's really about, really. So they got the wrong emotional beats because of it. The next thing that I would kind of say is that with was that so she comes into to the house. They all sit together. Like the three kids are on his three friends are on the couch. He's Ryunosuke's on his father's chair, the man's chair, and then Nuku Nuku's on her knees, like just putting her hands on his hand, putting his hands on his arm or on his knee or something like that. The same way, like you look at like old pictures of kings in Europe and how they would kind of like have women like do that, or the same way you would have like a dog. Some dogs would kind of like either sleep on their owner's feet, or sometimes they would kind of like put their paws on their owner's like leg or arm or whatever, just to get attention or just to kind of get that special pat on the back or whatever. Loyal to a form of a dog, really. So I kind of think that this is a good depiction of her because it kind of shows her in two ways. That obviously, her brain is a mix of a human and a cat brain and an android brain. So she's obviously being subservient like a cat. But I kind of think that her role in the series is to kind of be like, as I said, like the good old, as somebody once said, the good old housewife pleasing the manfolk. In another review. So she's kind of like doing that. So subservience, but also part of the thing that makes her that makes it kind of just sad and disturbing is that she doesn't have the mental capacity to understand that she's being objectified. So she kind of is very, very trusting. And I think that sometimes people would want to have a trusting partner because that way you can kind of take advantage of them, physically, emotionally, sexually, and other things like that. And I think that's really, really horrible. I also will tell you a personal story. Like I knew like this kid in high school, and he would always do things like his girlfriend would always wear short skirts, so he would always like grab her ass even on on the bus, like we'd be riding, and he would always be like trying to pull down her thong or G string. It was never right. And then also too, she came from a wealthy family, so she would kind of be lending him money. She was also very, very naive, and also there was other things like she would always like hook for him and other things like that. But also too, it's like no, he really treated her like a bowling ball, especially in public, whatever hole he wanted to put his finger into, she was always like kind of cool with, or she kind of cringe and then be cool with, but the reason why I share that story is it's very, very sad, how, because that is like sexual assault and taking advantage of somebody. And I know that's a very disturbing thing to share, especially for an anime review, but, in a way, Nuku Nuku is there's a comparison with Nuku Nuku because of how like naive she is and how she doesn't realize she's being objectified. And I think that if she was kind of manipulated into doing something sexual, she would probably go along with it. So I do think that there is a sense of taking advantage of somebody with naivety or low like social intelligence. Like obviously, that's in Nuku Nuku Dash, but that's obviously in the experience that I shared. But I also think Ryunosuke, um, he's more about his emotions and his insecurities. So I think that he doesn't have a malicious intent, even though it's a malicious thing to do. And even though obviously, like tricking Nuka Nuka into saying darling and honey and other things like that, even though that's kind of minor, it's still not right. It's not as bad as tricking somebody into sexual acts or doing sexual acts on somebody, like I was describing. But still, in both cases, it's objectifying and taking somebody who's naive, but in different levels of intensities. So the other part of the episode is that Miss Akiko, Ryunosuke has a father, I think Mr. Natsaku. Natsaku is his name, and then his father, then his wife is Miss Akiko. Miss Akiko her job is to track the missing android, which is Nuku Nuku. And I think one of the dumbest things of the series is that it's kind of obvious to the audience, but it's not obvious to the characters. So Miss Akiko is assigned to wear these sunglasses from her job that once you wear it in the presence of Nuku Nuku, missiles and other like devices get activated to take her out. So that way she can be apprehended and go back to the Mishima industry. So the professor who creates this sunglasses, her name is I think Shoku. I think it's like Shoko Shishibu or Professor Shoko Shikibu, if I'm saying the name correctly. And it's one of those things too that they do it in a very funny way, but her breast jiggle, and then you kind of seeing like the three presidents of the company going like dogs, and they have like very corny music doing it, so it is kind of like made to be funny. And then they also want to try the glasses, and they think that, as they say, this is the device that perverts have been dreaming about for years. So some of the voice acting is done in a way that can make you really laugh, like just the cartoonishness of it. Um, but they wanted to try the glasses because they assume that they're going to see her titties and her pussy. Again, it's objectification, but also like I will say that in the 80s and 90s with movies like a lot like Caddyshack or Happy Gilmore or a lot of other like um, movies sexualizing women, objectifying women, wanting to get pussy, titties and pussy. That was kind of very common, and that was also true in Japan. Like you look at anything Beavis and Butthead, their ultimate goal is to score and have sex. That's objectification of women. So this was a very very accepted style of comedy. But nowadays it's just taboo, and I think because we all understand how bad sexual assault is, but also taking advantage and also looking at women as just for their titties and pussies it's objectifying. So I think that when you look at anime like this, it's obviously cringe, but I'm happy to talk about it because I think it's good to look at things in different lights. But they try the device, it doesn't work. They force Miss Akiko to do it. Miss Akiko gets angry because the glasses make her look very very dorky. So when Nuku Nuku is at the house and um, entertaining like the guests, and so what happens is that one of them doesn't believe true love exists. Ryunosuke tells her that lie, and I think Sabochi is his name. So she decides to go on a date with Shibochi just to prove that true love exists. They go to a aquarium, and then Ryunosuke gets so jealous and insecure that he wears like a wannabe Inspector Gadget disguise, and he follows them. He gets busted, and then what happens is that he's also wearing like those sunglasses, and then a missile gets activated, and then it targets all of them. He jumps in the way to protect Nuku Nuku from the missile. Nuku Nuku goes into a trance, and then when she goes into a trance, she hears the voice of her original creator, protect all life, tactical form, and she turns into this android, destroys the missile, and that's that really. But she also recognizes that that he was saved, that she was saved by Ryunosuke. And then when the missile hits, all the boy characters, his three friends and Ryunosuke, they're all kind of like knocked out, or they're kind of like in shock of what happened. So they're not paying attention to Nuku Nuku. destroying the turning to her her superhero form, destroying the missile and whatever. And then actually, what happens at the very end of the episode is two things: that that the Mishima industry realized that the sunglasses that Shoku Professor Shikubu created was going to cost um I think over millions upon millions of dollars for one set. So if they kind of just like overproduce it, they would go bankrupt. But she's kind of like in her vanity and kind of thinks it's a great thing, and they kind of walk out on her. So it's played for comedy, like how she doesn't recognize that she's kind of just being adult and arrogant, and then it kind of cuts to the end where um, Nuku Nuku says, thank for saving me. And then she kind of is like, appreciating the seagulls and the birds that are around. And then Ryunosuke thinks to himself, like, no matter what I am to Nuku Nuku, I will always be by her side. So I think that, it definitely ends in a very, very heartwarming way. And I think that that's kind of what you see in the Nuku Nuku Dash series. It's a little bit like The Simpsons, where it doesn't matter what behavior Homer Simpson does, Marge forgives Homer. But in this one, I think that you kind of almost have Ryunosuke saying, you know what, I'm learning that, even if she dates other people and whatever, I'm going to be cool with it. I'm just going to be by her side. It's like I see her as a friend. I love her as a friend, really. That's kind of what he develops into. But it seems like every single episode, he kind of resets into an insecure teenager turning into a person at the end of the episode that actually doesn't objectify her. So it's the same cycle of it's almost like a character resetting at the beginning of every episode, So very typical to shows like The Simpsons. And obviously, when you watch this anime, there's Evangelion, there's Ghost in the Shell. A majority of Japanese anime has objectification of women. So as people said, it's not really an original idea. I think the original idea of like two people struggling with divorce and their kids caught in the middle, and there's an android called Nuku Nuku, like in the 1991 version. That all that there was a lot more originality in that idea, but this one doesn't have any of that. It's more like, as I said, that Nuku Nuku is more the Madonna and the horror, and you see it in this episode, and you're going to see it in other episodes as well. So so I'm happy to review this, and I do want to review all the episodes of Nuku Nuku Dash and just tell you how I feel about it. Obviously, if I reviewed it in the early 2000s when I first saw it, I would have a lot of different feelings. I think when I was younger, I didn't realize that this was a melodrama, meaning that sometimes there are scenes that are played out to kind of get to your feelings. But when you're kind of young and naive and whatever, you may not look at it. And I also was going through a lot of depression at that time. I wanted to feel love. And I think when I was depressed, I kind of like resonated with the Nuku Nuku Dash character. Like I was like, oh, well, I would wish I had a girl like Nuku Nuku that would unconditionally love me and be supportive of me. And I also didn't grow up with a mother, and my mother was the story about my biological mother Rose was that she was very abusive and neglectful. So I think that when I was younger, I watched this anime, and I was kind of almost just had a hope that there would be a woman like Nuku Nuku in reality. Um, but I would not hope for a woman like her in reality because of how naive and how easily she'd be objectified. Um, but I'm happy to look at it now where I can kind of look in a more analytical way and just say that, there's definitely objectification in this anime. It's definitely also an anime that's true. It doesn't have a lot of original ideas. There are some spats of comedy and melodrama that actually works. And I think that one of the messages I think of this whole series is that, as we are advancing as a technological species, there will be a point where we create artificial life, and artificial life is still a life, even if we don't see it as real. And I also think it's a metaphor. It's also a metaphor for people who want to just experience free will and do what they want. So there's definitely some themes in this anime that maybe I realize that other people don't realize, because every story has a resonates with people differently. So it's to me there's some things in this anime that are really really good, and I also think that with my analysis, I like with what I'm sharing about it, because I do think that I have some good things to share about this anime, and I say that with humility.